Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us at this special programme to recognise two important events. Firstly, International Women's Day that shines a light on women's experiences right across the world. And secondly, fittingly, the publication of this, the Stewart Report, Pathways, a New Approach for Women in Entrepreneurship. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of events to explore the Pathways findings, so do look out for more from us. My name is Dr. Vanessa Collingridge, and I'm delighted to have with me a panel of leading business experts to discuss not only the report, but its wider context and also their own experiences in entrepreneurship and the world of work. So joining us, we have Professor Eleanor Shaw, OBE, Associate Principal at the University of Strathclyde, with responsibility for the university's entrepreneurship strategy, with the board positions at the Chartered Association of Business Schools, the Small Business Charter, and the Scale Up Institute. Next, Carolyn Jameson, Chief Trust Officer at Trustpilot and formerly on the executive team of Skyscanner, who sits on the board of the Scottish National Investment Bank and is an investment committee member with the venture capital firm Scottish Equity Partners. Next is Sarah Ronald, founder of the strategic design firm Nile, a serial angel investor and member of multiple boards, including the Scottish Technology Ecosystem Advisory Board, and Anna Stewart, entrepreneur and investment partner with EOS, formerly founder and CEO of fintech business iDesign, a non-executive director at the Scottish Football Association, and also the chair and co-author with Mark Logan of the Stewart Report. So thank you all for coming along today to explore the report and its findings and the wider issue of women in entrepreneurship. Anna, if I could maybe start with you. Pathways was requested by the Scottish Government and it was launched, of course, just a couple of weeks ago. What's been the reaction from the wider business community?
It's a bit of an understatement saying it's been remarkable. It really has been overwhelmingly positive, and it's really heartening to see so much engagement. I mean, during the review itself, I couldn't believe how many people were wanting to come forward and contribute and add, inform the review. But post-launch, I can't really imagine how much more we could have asked for. And the engagement we've seen is fantastic. And that's come through in the participation, the attendees today. There's a huge number of people tuning in, which is fantastic. And I think all that tells us is that, the subject matter is relevant, it's meaning and it's engaging and resonates with a number of members of the ecosystem. So I'm encouraging that to carry on, and I'm excited about what we can do going forward to keep that momentum going.
But of course, we're all used to reports, and often reports don't go anywhere. It certainly feels very different. It is very action-oriented, but it also doesn't pull its punches about the challenges that women face, not only in entrepreneurship, but wider society. How important was it to get that tone right, that this is about action, not words?
Yeah, we're still words until government embrace the recommendations that we all want them to do. But I think it was important for us to look at this at a root cause level, because it's all very well sort of saying, look, women aren't getting enough investment, so let's put money into investment funds for women. But if we don't have enough women coming through into the system, then that's still not going to work. So it's very much a portfolio of solutions, of interventions that will deliver this transformative change rather than incremental change. And I think I'd want to emphasise that it's not a lamentation of the situation. As an eternal optimist and an entrepreneur, then the aim is to try and come up with solutions and actions. So it is all about making changes happen.
You raise an interesting point there about where have all the women gone. Eleanor, you were responsible for deep diving into the data. Where have all the women gone, or did we just not know to look for them?
Okay, so I've been looking for the women for a long, long time, almost 20, 25 years. And there are women, but the sad thing is that if we compare business today with business 30 years ago, there's still only at most about 17.5% of UK, including Scottish businesses, owned by women. And that figure just hasn't shifted. And, we really need to try to shift the dial on this. And that's why tentatively really excited about the report. Scottish Government, please respond to it. Tell us how you're going to take it forward, because it's really, really important. Because if we can implement the changes that are recommended in the report, everyone is going to benefit. The pie is going to grow for absolutely everyone. So it's a brilliant thing to do. It will really boost our economy in economic terms, but also from an inclusive perspective and from a societal perspective. So it's just such a positive set of findings, underpinned by real data we've been desperate to get our hands on for a long time. So that disaggregation of data has allowed us to really develop an informed set of recommendations, those actions that you spoke about, Anne. I know the report really is highly actionable. You've laid it all out, made it quite easy. All we need is government support now to make it happen.
Just coming in on this word, the disaggregation of data. So what you're saying is nobody had actually done the work up front before you did this report to really deep dive into what were women's experiences and how they were different maybe from men's experiences.
So, well, there has actually been a lot of research speaking with women and trying to understand their experiences. But what we've been really short of are large databases like the one that we've been using that lays it out for us in hard numbers exactly what the position is. It's in black and white. We can't argue with it. Let's now get on and do something about it. And not just women, all groups are underrepresented within our entrepreneurial community. To be aware of that underrepresentation, to understand the benefits if we boost representation and create a more diverse, inclusive entrepreneurial community, and to do nothing about it, that really makes me worry. That's the wrong thing to do. It's not the right thing to do.
I'm interested in this sense of community, and the flip side of that is the sense of belonging. Sarah, you have started up your own company. You have had to negotiate the different stages of setting up an organisation. What's been your experience as an entrepreneur?
So I really enjoy being an entrepreneur. First off, I think it's the best choice for me. I think when I look back to the different stages of the company, the bit that has really made a difference for me is the community and the support network that I built up around me. So in the report, we talk about the hidden networks, like the social networks that aren't visible. And the difference in my journey to maybe what's the norm in the report is that I've, from the very early stages, built up these networks, either volunteered. If there wasn't a group there, I've made a group. So I've brought the UX designers together, or I've looked at the industry bodies, the Service Design Network. Oh, they're not in the UK. So let's set that up in the UK. So I've created these spaces where there's other people like me that can be a real support at the different stages. Because, with entrepreneurship, the company, I think it's easy in the early days. It's just sheer brute force of getting through, and you don't really need to worry about other people. And then you get other people, and you need to, pardon, need to, it's the passion. And then you need to start thinking about, how do I create something scalable? That's a whole different challenge. And having people in your network that you can call to say, how did you tackle this challenge? It just shortcuts the learning. And if you don't have access to that, I think it's really lonely, it's really hard, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Carolyn, from an investment point of view, what's been your experience? Are there enough women making the decisions about who to invest? Are there enough women coming forward asking for the money? And what stage is that really a problem?
I think there definitely aren't enough women. There aren't enough women asking for the money at the moment, and that is for all the reasons that Anna has identified in her report, and some of those really go back to the root causes from when we're children and why you're made to feel that's not the route that's available there for you. And definitely in the investment community, there is a lot of room for improvement around who's making the decisions on where money is invested. And we see that in the low rates of investment in women-led businesses versus male-led businesses. So I think there is a lot of work to do in that community, and you know, I've seen people in that community who are really striving to make a difference there. But I think we need a greater effort, collaborative effort there across the board, and that's one of the recommendations that, Anna, I know you've made in your report.
Yes, so I think that you touching on that, one of the more provocative statements, although I didn't really think it was that provocative at the time, was, you know, to create the discussion around the fact that, you know, 2% of institutional investment goes to female founders at the moment, and
2%,
that's
so I'm just going to stop
Two-
there because that can easily disappear in a
Yeah.
conversation. 2%.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things to add to that, though. One is actually in the last year, it was dropped to 1.5%. So that's 1.5 pence in every pound going to female entrepreneurs. I would emphasise, though, the reality is that there are so few female entrepreneurs coming through into that institutional investment space. By, as I say, the argument of putting a fund for women in that space is not going to resolve the problem, because the root cause is still going to be there. So it snaps back to the challenge that you won't get enough talented female entrepreneurs coming through. But the other thing about it is that we talked about is that you know, it's so imbalanced in the ecosystem just now. 90% of the Scottish ecosystem, investment ecosystem, is made up of men and of one background. So you can't, you know, you do, by human nature is that you will gravitate towards characteristics that you recognise as yours. So that's the point of having a diverse environment, a diverse investment environment, because you will get better decisions and more diverse decisions. So we, you know, by incentivising, which is what we're proposing in the report, you know, investment groups that are already in ecosystem, or getting Scottish Government to incentivise those organisations to be more inclusive in their approach and actively make a difference. I don't think it's too much to ask that we maybe just ask for one out of 5 people in the investment community or in investment firms to be women, because it's not all on government. It's a collaborative effort. It's a collective endeavour to make a difference. And to those that question it, look, it's about provocation to discuss this. And I absolutely understand that not everybody's going to agree with it, but you have to discuss it, because in the last 10 years, nothing has changed. And, you know, we jump into the territory of the Equal Pay Act, you know, many years ago, 50 years ago, that was launched, that came into force. And we're still talking about the gender pay gap 53 years on, and some recent information, I think, as Eleanor or Karen we were talking about, was that that's still going to be some time away before we get equity in pay.
It's 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, we're talking decades.
It's an enormous amount of time, and what it means is that the gender pay gap also translates, and there's figures out this week, into the gender pension gap as well. So this unequal access to all of the resources that are needed to set up and to grow a company is enduring. You know, so if there's anything that's enduring when it comes to women as entrepreneurs, it's the unequal access that they face and that they encounter when they try to pull together the economic, the social, the human and the reputational capital. Those are the 4 capitals that you need when you're setting up a business. And it's incredibly difficult, particularly, I think, for women to access the social capital and I mean, do we even start talking about reputational capital and the notion that despite having large amounts of human capital, an amazing value proposition, you may not be seen as a credible entrepreneur or as a credible investment proposition.
I'm going to interrupt you there. Let's just unpack what those terms mean. So what does social capital look like for somebody who has a woman who has a brilliant business idea or a really interesting business idea? What does that look like, and what does the reputational capital look like? I think we can get our heads around, you know, the idea of the economic capital and maybe even the human resources that would go into that. But the social and the reputational.
Okay. And the social and the reputational are really closely linked with one another. So the social capital is, who do you know? And I mean, I think you were talking about this earlier. You know, if you didn't know people, then you made connections to them, or you created networks where things would happen. It's really difficult sometimes to know where the networks are because they're invisible, and you if you're not invited, it's really difficult.
How do you know?
How do you know? How do you know? But we do know that you need that social capital. You know, you need to build your team. You need to build your team of supporters, ambassadors, all of that around you, because they then help you access other resources. Reputational, so there's a theory, a well-known theory or concept that's called the liability of newness. And it applies to all companies when they're starting out. You're new, who are you, what do you do, why should I do business with you? Female founders really experience, I can see you nodding your heads, that's a bigger challenge.
So familiar.
Yeah, and it's, you know, what do I need to walk about with a badge saying I am a credible entrepreneur? I mean, it's crazy. So I don't know what your experiences of that have been.
I have some funny stories from back in the day. But when we first started out, the company was called Bunnyfoot, and so I would have been early, let's say mid-20s at that point, and walking into, and I'm selling. We specialise in regulated industries, so that's where we work. So think finance, think insurance, and mostly male-dominated, and going into these boardrooms to say, yeah, we can help you with your online journeys and your digital estate, and they're looking at me going, Bunnyfoot, that sounds like a call set, you know. I basically don't want to say the word, but you know, that kind of, and yes, basically yes. And so, what do you do at that point? You're like, oh, go on, right, yeah, okay, great. Let's talk about your journeys. So yes, I understand.
Yeah, it's tough.
And actually, one of the things that really jumped out at me from this report is that the root causes you talk about, you know, it's not just in entrepreneurship. I think it really applies to women in business. So I was having a laugh at some of the quotes in there. So, oh, that's happened to me, or somebody's. So I think it's really broadly applicable, Anna, and I think that's why it's such a strong report and why you're having such engagement.
And well, appreciate that. And I think one other thing, there's a couple of things I want to add to that. One is there's four of us around this discussion, but I only knew one of the people here a little bit before a year ago. And, you know, it's also on us to actively put ourselves out there. I mean, I just want to get away from this feeling of victim. We must be positive about what we can do. And I think if we've got the momentum here, the amount of people I met during this process, the amazing entrepreneurial stories, but I didn't just speak to women. I spoke to men, I spoke to other, you know, groups that are maybe underrepresented. And I think it's important that everybody's included in this discussion because it's an inclusive approach that's required. We need everybody at the table if we're going to make a difference. I mean, it is a male-dominated environment just now, but I have had such great feedback from across all genders, all backgrounds. So I just want to build on that and ensure that we continue to get that input from all those different types of sectors and sort of backgrounds, because that was what will make a successful outcome for us. And the other element that Carolyn talked about is, having met all these people during the last 12 months, it's amazing the wealth of talent we have in Scotland at the early stage, right through to the growing high growth businesses. But it's incumbent upon us as well. We can't expect somebody else to do this for us. You know, it doesn't come easy. You know, entrepreneurship is not easy, but it's incredibly empowering when you start to move into it. But it's to start to keep those relationships going and build those networks that we're already forming through this process and well beyond. And I think that's happening just because the conversation is happening.
Where does the problem start? If we can go right down to the grassroots levels, where does the problem start and how does that manifest itself?
I think from when you're little, the difference is there that, you know, are either conscious or unconscious. So education, for example, the things that maybe women are encouraged towards. So I think it starts as early as that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think having more normalising it at an early stage and having role models that you can look to, you think, actually, I could do that. That could be a decent pathway for me. I just think it's not so visible. And if you grow up in a family where there are no entrepreneurs and maybe you don't have any friends that are entrepreneurs and you're not exposed to it at school, like, what do we expect is going to happen?
What does the data say about this, Eleanor?
So the I have to be honest, I'm not sure what the data says about where it starts, and there's no one thing, okay? So this is a societal-wide, it's a systems-wide. I actually think at a very young age, children are just the same. They're naturally curious, they're naturally inquisitive, and then what happens is they may go into, they're socialised, okay? So they're then socialised, and they're socialised through education, they're socialised through experience, they're socialised through sport, and when they come out the other end, they then may have perceptions of themselves, and others have perceptions of them that perhaps suggest, oh, maybe I'm better having a career in this area rather than that area. So I do think, and this is mentioned in the report, I think we need to do, I see a strong correlation between education, entrepreneurship and economy. The three are very, very much linked, and that's why we need this systems approach. We need to, from very, very early stage of education, encourage that natural curiosity and inquisitiveness, and rather than testing young people to only pass exams and really not encouraging them to explore the world around them, we just need to do more. You know, we've got great initiatives like Young Enterprise Scotland, but I know that in some schools, Young Enterprise Scotland is running and the kids don't even realise. So we need to do a much better job. Anna, you said we've got lots of brilliant things happening. We need to be much more inclusive in those opportunities and get the messages out there so that everyone has the opportunity.
And actually maybe encourage more women, more young girls to come forward into Young Enterprise Scotland, not allow that gender imbalance or that social inequality imbalance to get embedded in the first place.
I mean, there's so many elements to this, but I think we do need to go all the way back to a root cause piece here, because, you know, the amount of, I wouldn't say objections, but when you're talking about the challenges, the question is, well, women often is thrown at me as an argument against it, is women just not confident enough, Anna. You know, they need to get more confident, or they're more maternal. They're more maternal. And, you know, I kind of immediately respond to that with going, well, does that mean I'm not warm and maternal? And I'm a mother. And so, but I think the question, I'm not sort of trivialising it, but the reality is, it's not about, well, yes, I accept actually that women are not as confident in the entrepreneurial environment. Not everybody, there's always exceptions. But the question we need to ask is, why are they not confident? And that takes you back to way down the line to school, coming out of school, the conditioning that goes on in society. I mean, right now, there's a recommendation in the report about a Fair Society champion accreditation. And, you know, on first glance, you would go, what's that got to do with females and entrepreneurship? But you touch on the workplace piece. It's about normalising that, you know, men, you know, get penalised for taking 2 weeks off for paternal leave, and very few take it. And if that carries on, then nothing will change, because that's just, again, fueling the social stereotyping that continues, that women's place is in the home. And I know that is changing dramatically, but the undercurrent's still there. So we need to completely turn it on its head, which hopefully in some ways this report is really about trying to create that discussion and then come out with actions to try and resolve it.
And one of the actions that I found really interesting going through the report was the idea about pop-ups. Now, unpack that a little bit and discuss how they can help tackle some of the lack of resources that are available to women and different social groups as well, that will then disadvantage them and build in this inequality right the way through the system.
Yeah, I mean, there is no structure or framework for women really that are perhaps primary carers. I know don't just mean mothers. I mean other people that have got other primary care dependencies. But once again, that responsibility generally lies with women. So what you see is zero access. There's no avenue to go into entrepreneurship in Scotland anyway. In the current ecosystem, not easy. And certainly if you factor in, I think 20%, roughly 20% of Scotland's made up of single parent households, which over 90% are women, are mothers, then you're immediately closing the door on 20% of the population, because there's nothing in there that's going to help a woman who's got that extra burden of primary care, the cognitive burden of trying to juggle that. And by the way, they'll likely have jobs as well. It's just they're having to juggle them all. So the aim there of the pop-ups is to give access to people that have got, logistically constrained, that currently have no visibility or access point to get into entrepreneurship. Again, it's all about a folio of interventions, and that on its own, though, I feel will not just help women, but it will actually help other groups that are falling into that category, and I think there's a lot of them.
Would any of you like to come in on that? Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's a very, very strong recommendation. I know that my situation, once I had kids, it became very, very difficult to run the business in the same way, because prior to kids, you have all your mental resources available all the time on tap 24/7. And then kids come along and all of a sudden there's a different range of priorities, and half your brain is on the juggler. Even if you're able to have help, and I have a very supportive husband, but we still need to plug in a lot of care, and that takes thought. And if the business wasn't successful now, we wouldn't maybe have access to that or be able to afford that kind of support. So yeah, I think it's incredibly hard for women to start when they're already mothers. Yeah.
I think that's right. And one of the things that I've found quite interesting through my career is, I do think over the years, certainly I have seen a change in attitude to some degree. I remember starting to work and I already had a daughter. And when I would say I had a child, the first thing most people would say to me is, where is she? As if I'd just left her somewhere, and I'd have to, in a nursery. And then I would get the question, is the nursery okay? Because at that point, it wasn't actually that common. And I definitely would never be asked that now, I don't think. But even with that change, there is just a reality of how you juggle. And we did that as a family for many, many years. And I know my husband ended up giving up work so that I could focus on my career and travel. And just the freedom that has given me and the difference it's made has been really immense. So not everybody can do that. So we need to find a way to support people who do still have to juggle.
Yeah. What the figures tell us is that the cost of childcare in the UK has rocketed. It's rocketed since 2010, 2014. The childcare in Scotland and the UK is the most expensive across all OECD countries. And I can't remember the exact figure, but for an average household with 2 salaries coming in with 2 kids, it's at least a quarter of the household salary that's taken up. So there's the financial burden, but there's also the juggling around, and you have to drop off by a certain time and pick up by another time. And I agree, it just makes it incredibly difficult unless you've got all of those other supports around you.
Yeah.
And just sort of summarising that as well, I mean, the idea of the pop-ups is it's about being agile and smart and cost-effective. We don't want to keep adding new things on top of it. It's about complementing what's out there and is viable, that's actually going to reach in a more targeted way people. But as a number one, I mean, the fact there is no childcare support if you go into entrepreneurship, if you are a woman, and many of us are aware in terms of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial women, is that there was nothing there for you to say, well, I'll go into that. If you've got a great idea and you're working in a larger company and you have children and you look at, if you want to maybe pursue entrepreneurship, it might be a good time to consider it. There's nothing there that's going to make you want to go there, because there's nothing about supporting childcare. There's nothing about, supporting you through that process while you have other. And I suppose my argument is it's not mutually exclusive. You should not have to compromise your ability to be an entrepreneur simply because you have children. And one other thing I did want to add is that the emphasis about the pop-ups around perhaps primary carers is that I don't want this to be a women-only discussion, because we want to encourage men to be more primary carers as well. That's the whole point of this. And so if a man is the primary carer, in which is happening more and more, which is wonderful, we want to encourage that, but we will welcome them in is that primary care role to tap into this opportunity. Because again, that's talking about the inclusive nature, and that it's expected that men as well as women might carry on these roles in society going forward.
Okay, I am going to pick up on this diversity point, because it's great we've got 4 fabulous women here. But I look at you all, you are within a similar-ish age. All of us are of a similar socioeconomic background, educational background. Where are the more diverse women? Where are the women of colour? Where are the people from the single parents, the people who are struggling financially? We can all come here today because we've got partners or the economic resilience that allows us to take the hit, to donate our time. None of us are being paid for this, but we can afford to donate our time. Where are the other women? Are they out there? Are they hidden? Or are they just not able to even access the beginning of the ladder?
I mean, I'll start. I mean, I'd start with recommendation 31 is what I'm going to start with. And, you know, it may be the last recommendation on the list, but it is one of the most important recommendations. And, you know, I engaged, and the team that I had with Judy and Gemma and Jackie, who were fantastic in supporting me, and Mark, who co-authored. But we engaged with as many people as we could, one-to-one. I wanted to get a real feel for it, not just a survey, but we did a number of different things to engage. And, you know, we talked to a number of people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and they contributed to the report as, you know, valued contributors to the entrepreneurial discussion. The idea, naivety or not, was to then incorporate that into the report and understand that as well, layer that as a society has a very, you know, the intersectionality of society in Scotland is, you know, it's not about men and women. There are so many other intersections that we need to consider. But when you get to 150 pages in a report that's supposed to be is focused on women, Mark and I's conclusion when we were doing it, and we got input from people from other underrepresented groups into this discussion, was it wasn't doing it justice. It wasn't. It was diminishing by trying to incorporate into such a big document. And so our feeling was that actually it's such an important issue, it needs to be talked about as a separate review, because there's so many nuances there, and to sort of make a sweeping statement that our solutions are going to, I think some of them will have some overlap, but what I've learned during this 12-month period is they're absolutely not going to overlap on everything. But I look forward to these panels and that we have more diversity going forward, and it's a commitment I think we should make. I'd also say I'd like to see more men in the panels, and you know, I think that because they have to be at the table, they have to be engaged in this, and everybody has to be. So hopefully that kind of answers to some extent. It's not an excuse, but it's the reality of the situation.
So we need to get better at asking the right questions, opening up the right spaces and the right pathways for everybody to come forward. And I think you're right. By focusing on getting women into entrepreneurship, getting women involved in those pathways, creates a culture shift, a mindset shift that then opens our eyes up to the whole breadth of underserved communities. And there are many, many underserved communities, as you've all been discussing. What I'd like to focus on now is this idea of investment. And as we go through, so you've got your pop-ups, we're starting at grassroots, we're working through. What are the main barriers for growing your companies?
I think it's that ongoing access to finance, obviously, and also and as part of that, you asked earlier on actually about the stages where women face obstacles. I think it's all the way through, and that can even one of the things that jumped out in the report that I really liked was this concept of where women are pitching at events, that the panels that are making the decisions should be balanced. I think that's really important. Because I think that's very daunting when you see women having to pitch and there are no other women there. I think that's very difficult.
Yeah, just picking up on that point. I think whilst we're talking about entrepreneurship here, I think the same challenge or the frictions exist getting into angel investing. So I certainly found that far more challenging entering into the angel world than being a... Yeah.
Can you just unpack what angel investing
So,
is for people who might not know?
there are syndicates that when you're first looking for money, you can get friends and family money, or you can get an idea together and go to syndicates. And syndicates range in size. So, and we have loads in Scotland. There are loads and loads. I think in Scotland there are more syndicates than anywhere else, or so I have been told.
Yeah,
Evelyn might know better. Yeah. And the syndicates are, spaces that I think feel very uncomfortable for women. I certainly felt very uncomfortable, and I started in 2015 and really had to force myself to go to the meetups. And
What was behind you feeling so uncomfortable?
well, I think two things. I don't come from a finance background, so it's not. I don't really understand the language, and I haven't been trained in that, and so I feel like I'm maybe a little bit stupid before I even walk in over the threshold, and that's that's a bit awkward, and also because I didn't have a social network. Actually, I've got to say my husband really helped me through that journey. But I didn't have any friends or people that I could ask and say, well, what's the minimum ticket size, or how do you even get involved, or what syndicates should I be thinking about? It was just, it's a bit alien. And I've spoken to a lot of women at senior positions, and I think they're interested in it when you explain it to them, but it's not part of it's not normalised. It's not an easy entry in.
And
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience to Sarah actually on that. And the one thing I have definitely seen is that male colleagues of mine they're more actively approached. And so I think it's back to this responsibility of syndicates, other investment firms, to think about how they can play a part in encouraging a broader range of investors. And I found it very challenging. And actually, I ended up getting involved with investing women originally, and I think it was because I felt safer in that environment.
And again, isn't that interesting? Because looking from the outside, I'm sure everyone watching this from work or home would look at you and think, what a confident bunch of women with amazing education and resources, social resources, reputational capital, social capital. And yet even you are responding, saying, it's really hard to walk in a room without that confidence of knowing the right language, having people looking like you in the room.
Yeah. It goes back to how do you access those invisible networks, and those invisible networks exist everywhere. They exist whether you're trying to access finance, whether you're trying to access particular types of advice. It's really difficult, and this is not just a women's problem. This is every single underrepresented group finds it incredibly difficult when they walk into a room and everyone's either all white females. I mean, I've really never experienced all women like this before, but it can happen, or all men, no person from any ethnic background. There's challenges for people if you just don't look and feel the same and have the same mindset. So I think one of the things that the report's trying to do, and Pathways is a great name for it, it's making those pathways visible. And I also love what you've done. If the pathway isn't there taking you to anything, then create it. Yeah. Just create that space. And we just need to encourage more of us to have that curiosity, that sense of wanting to do something. And this is really important as well. And again, I think we've mentioned this, collaborating. Really being open to helping others, and others will help you too. So not going along to events and thinking, what can I get out of this? No, going along to events and thinking, this is great. What can I learn? What can I learn? And then with that, how can I then help other people?
And just on that point, when you go to events, it's also thinking, how can I contribute more? So attending isn't enough. If you want to get into the secret networks or the invisible networks, whatever we're calling them, I think you have to also, how can I help to organise the next one? Can I get onto the committee? What more can you do? It's not simply attending, I don't think, is enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to give,
Yes.
without a doubt. And I discuss this with entrepreneurs that I work with all of the time, and we had a session recently, and this is what they said, that they understood that when you don't go along trying to get business, but when you go along thinking, how can I help? How can I contribute? It was just revealing for them what happened. It really was, wow, okay, I see how this all works now.
Just again, trying to combine that to make it relevant to the report. I think things like the Entrepreneurial Pathfinder platform, it's about connecting dots, and these invisible networks, we should make them more visible across the board. I would actually, you're absolutely right, Eleanor, it's not a women's issue. I think it happens actually in the men's environment as well, those that don't. So it's just trying to improve entrepreneurship as a whole, but particularly I think it's important for the journey. So going through the pathways at the beginning, and things like the pop-up pre-starts is just one aspect. But we want more businesses to be growing. And we need to connect them to that next rung in the ladder to make it accessible and easier and more welcoming. So the Pathfinder platform, that the concept around that is trying to just make it more visible and structured, so that I think I was reading something in LinkedIn, I can't remember who posted it, but used the word squiggly, which was you weave your way around. You don't quite know where the next step is, and you want to have 4 or 5 options, but you want to have the confidence that is going in the general direction and helping you find your path. So you've got options there. So again, the platform itself is designed for everybody, but it will particularly help people that are not participating properly in the system.
I'd like to now maybe ask some questions on behalf of some of our audience members. So we've got Peter Walker, editor of Insider, who is asking, what is Anna or key stakeholders or Scottish Government actively doing to ensure the issues that you raise in the report are acted upon and, importantly, soon?
Well, they haven't done anything yet, so I'll continue to push for them to embrace all the recommendations in the report. I mean, I think, look, that's brilliant. I said this at the beginning. It's amazing, the discussion that is generated and engagement across multiple sectors, and I will continue to be passionate about making sure that conversation continues and to continue that momentum. But that's just, somebody called it, I was reading a report recently and it talked about performative activism, which is, socialising something but not acting on it. And I really want to make sure that we act on this, because it's a really great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity for Scotland, because the way we're set up, if we actually did this, we could be leading in terms of inclusive and healthier economy and better economic output for all. So, that will be what I'm championing. But I think it's a very valid point. We need to see some action, and we need some hands going in pockets to invest in it.
And I completely agree. And I'd like to compare the importance of this review with the earlier review of the Scottish tech sector. And it was met very warmly by Scottish Government, and it very quickly, got traction and got budget. And we now have the launch of, the Tech Scaler Network all over Scotland. I would like to see us having the same governmental, private sector, educational response to the findings that have come out of this, because it's not just government. We all parts of the system need to come together to help make this happen. Government can be an anchor institution in helping with that and facilitating that, and and lubricating things initially. But I suppose, yes, government, but we need all of us to be helping in this. The entrepreneurial communities, educational communities, investment communities, we all need to come together and to make this happen.
Karen, what are your thoughts about what you would like to see happen from this report?
I think I would very much echo what Eleanor said there. I think it's about us all being a bit braver about really tackling what the underlying root causes are. And this report brings real clarity to that, having the data so that we can understand the problem and then measure impact. I think, we all need to get behind it and really get some momentum going.
I mean, the question is, why wouldn't we? Really? Why wouldn't we? There's no other plan that I can see to make our economy get really healthy and to make an inclusive society. And we're a small country. We can do this.
Yeah.
We're, you know,
Yeah.
yes.
We're really small. We can definitely collaborate and come together and make it happen.
Yes.
You'd hope so.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and just on that, there's been lots of initiatives and programs and projects and reports out there, and really high caliber reports. And we worked really closely with the Rose Review team, and they were absolutely brilliant supporting us in what we're doing in Scotland, because the story is the same. I mean, what we're finding, the key challenges are not. It's not rocket science, it's not new. What we've probably tried to do in Scotland, because we've had the opportunity, thanks to the commissioning of the report by Kate Forbes, is that we're able to talk about it and maybe push things, in the direction that we want by looking at it slightly differently. We've tried to turn it on its head, and using the entrepreneurial minds that we've engaged with in this process, and leading females that in the industry, to take a different perspective. And certainly when working with Mark, it was actually identifying how we could look at it differently to try and make transformative change rather than incremental. We're not talking about improvement by 1% a year here. That's going to take hundreds, thousands of years and an awful lot of extra work. If you're running a business, you'd be going, gosh, half the population of Scotland, we're not tapping into that. If it was a business, you'd be saying, right, what steps, what investment can we make to tap into that, to utilise it properly? Because ultimately, we all agree that, well, I think we all agree, and Scotland agrees, that women are equally talented to men. And if that's not in question, which it shouldn't be, then the question is, how do we support them better? That's the answer. So hopefully that will deliver results.
I think on that, Anna, the benefits. So if we can get this right, and I'm going to use figures here at a UK level from the Rose report. So they're suggesting an extra £250 billion if we can encourage women to set up and grow companies at the same rate as men. Now, how much more is everyone going to benefit from that? And I think you're right. Why wouldn't we do it? And as I said at the beginning, knowing this and knowing what the actual potential benefits of the impact would be, if we sit back and do nothing, I don't really think that's a great place that any of us would want to be in, because we're growing the pie for everyone.
And on a very practical point, we need to make sure that we are creating jobs for the next generation. Like, we're coming to the end of a golden age of what was capitalism, and we're going to be starting off into something new. We need those jobs from the old world are going away. We need to make sure that there are a lot more minds thinking and creating the jobs of the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to move on now to a really interesting, there are actually two questions from Claire Waring, who's from Cumulus Oncology. She's the founder and CEO. She asks, is there an age difference between men and women in when they start their business?
Well, there's a bit of data on that, and the thing about data, by the way, is that this is just the beginning, I think. I mean, there's an expectation and recommendation to create a much better database and information disaggregated by gender, but ethnicity and other dimensions, socioeconomic dimensions. So, until we start doing that, there will be other things. But there is a bit of an insight into that, which is that, there was a big there's a big spike in female entrepreneurs starting earlier in their journey.
So we're talking about in the 20s?
Yes, before they're 25. And actually, interestingly, there's a slight skew towards women in their 40s to starting businesses. Relative to men, there's more women starting businesses. Very marginal. So, and until you start to create that trend, it's very difficult to measure on 1 year of data. So I think, it's encouraging to see more females. And one of the big stats, of course, that came out recently was, a record number of female startups in the UK. I think it was over 150,000. In Scotland, I think it's about 5,500 last year, or just over 5,000. And that's brilliant. But I think the context is that you've got to remember the whole driver here is to narrow the gap. So we need to encourage them at all ages through the journey, and not exclude them from entering that journey simply because they're having children or they've got other dependencies. But the younger age groups are definitely coming through. However, society has decided, that at the moment, people going into the workplace straight out of university, there's a 10% pay gap already formed before you even get to your mid-20s. So you're already starting to see skewing going on that we need to address. So, I mean, combined, I think the challenge there is, yes, we are seeing more women starting earlier, but it's still not coming through in terms of startups. And the 1 in 5 in Scotland hasn't, as Ellen has already said, has not actually shifted yet. So it's still early days to see whether things are changing, and they're certainly not changing at any great pace.
I mean, entrepreneurship doesn't exist in some isolated space over here. It's part of the labour market. So all of the challenges that people face in the labour market, they face them in entrepreneurship as well. So what that means is the gender pay gap continues into entrepreneurship. It's great that over the last year we've had more females incorporating businesses, and we know that of those incorporating, more of them are younger. Now, what does that mean? It possibly means because they're younger, they've gone through more entrepreneurship education either at school, college or university, so they've been exposed to those opportunities and they've done something about it. However, we've also just come out of one of the worst environments for setting up and sustaining a business that we've known due to COVID. And the flip side is, during COVID, many more women lost their jobs than men. If we compare redundancies during COVID with redundancies during the financial crisis, I think during COVID, something like 73% more women were made redundant and 7% more men were made redundant. So that's an awful lot of women, okay, who were forced to exit paid employment, and they need to try. These are skilled. These will be skilled women who are looking for something else to do. So what we need, again, more data, and we need to be collecting that data over longer periods of time so that we can really understand what the patterns are and what interventions are working. Because what we don't want to do is push more women into entrepreneurship to solve an economic problem that actually makes them poorer. One of the big issues is in work poverty, in entrepreneurship poverty, and we've got to consider that as well. So it's complex.
I think it's a really good question, and I think that's the stuff we want to be measuring going forward as part of this, the actions that were coming out of this report.
Now, Claire asked a supplementary question, which I'm sure you'll all find interesting as well. Do you think women sometimes prioritise differently? Do you think they might put things like relationships, health, life-work balance before financial success? And is this part of the built-in discrimination? It's assumed that maybe women won't be as driven or focused on financial success. On you go.
My husband would definitely say no. But I mean, it will differ. Women are different. I think society encourages us to prioritise in those areas. But I don't think everybody does. But it's definitely there as an encouragement, I think, for women. Yes, and that will ultimately lead more women to prioritise that, I suppose.
And I think Caroline, do you think the financial motivation changes as you get older?
Yes, I do. I think because when you're starting out, you want to be successful, and if you get to a point where you have been and you're able to look at life differently, I think it. Certainly for women, I think then it puts a lot of pressure on what should I be prioritising here, and you do then prioritise your longer term stability, pensions, all those sorts of things that we have to think about as we get older. Yeah.
Can I answer that question in a different way, which is I think women have to prioritise all of the time. I think, I feel so busy all of the time. I need to prioritise all of the time. And I can't imagine, you're setting up, you're growing a business, you've got other responsibilities. My goodness, you have to prioritise if you're going to succeed across all of those. And also prioritising yourself so that you stay sane during the whole process.
Yeah.
You just used the word should, Carolyn, which, I think Claire's question is really interesting, because I think that's that societal conditioning and stereotype that we should be at home. There's a guilt element of, you're not a good mother if you're not at home, and that sounds crazy. And people will go, well, and many people, engaged in this conversation think that's crazy, but actually, that's still an ongoing conversation, and that is, seeps into the societal expectations of women. So I think the question should I be is the issue, and certainly something that we need to get away from, because we shouldn't. We should all be able to do what we want, and I think there's nothing wrong with being full-time, parent at home, but that should also be something that a man might want to do. It's not about being a woman, and it's on us to do that. And that's currently how the system's set up. It's an expectation that we will compromise more than men. So I think it is a societal thing. Yeah.
Well, you won't be surprised to know that we're almost out of time. We've just got 5 minutes or so left. And before we wrap up, I really would like to have some final thoughts, and also maybe one piece of advice, or a really strong piece of advice for women at any stage of their entrepreneurial careers, whether they are thinking about maybe starting a business or scaling up as well. So let's start at the furthest end. Eleanor, final reflections on our discussion today on the report, and then any advice.
So final reflections on the report. We're a really small country. We've got absolutely all of the correct pieces of the jigsaw to make this happen. So let's just come together. Think of it as a national endeavour that's going to benefit everyone. So, sometimes we can be stuck in our little fiefdoms, and I wish we wouldn't. I think we're really small. Other small nations have managed to do it. We can do it as well. So collaboration and being inclusive is great. Advice, okay, so I'm not an entrepreneur, so who am I to give anyone advice? But I do work with lots of entrepreneurs, and my advice would always be to find out where things are happening, and don't think that you are an island and you're by yourself. There are always going to be people there that want to help you, that believe in you, and just put that network around you. That would probably be one of the biggest pieces of advice that I could give.
Well, my final thoughts on the report, I think, would be on this collective point. It's a collective responsibility of everybody to change this. It's a really massive problem that the report has highlighted. The causes are really clearly set out, and I think it's on everyone now to take that responsibility. If I look at my own career, some of the most critical turning points for me have been where men have really helped and encouraged and supported, and it's given me that confidence that we often will hear that women lack. It's not. It's about encouraging women. So I think really, if I could ask everyone to just have a look at the report and think about where you can help. And advice for me would be, I'm not an entrepreneur either. I've worked with many, and in my own career, I've always found just having a goal, really being clear on what your goal is and what you're working towards. It can change, but I think just having that clarity of direction, and it's a common word now, but resilience, it's so important. So really work on your personal resilience.
I mean, the unfortunate thing about going third is that I'm agreeing with everything that has gone before. I absolutely think that really focus on your network. Don't think that, or a mistake I often see is I don't have time. I don't have time for that. That feels like a luxury. I need to focus on my business, my product, my whatever. Really spend the time curating your network, because you will come across wonderful people like Anna, and you'll wish that you'd met them 10 years ago. But so really focus on the network, because it will pay dividends at some point, and you have to put that effort in. I think for any entrepreneurs listening to this at the moment, or any women that have been successful but maybe not as an entrepreneur and are interested in getting into investment, then I'm sure any one of us would be happy to hear and signpost and help and start that network, and help you to figure out where these conversations are happening and where people are hanging out.
Anna, briefly, we've got 1 minute.
Oh my God! Well, they've said it all. So, and well, look, the report itself is a bit of paper at the moment with some black ink in it, and I think the outcome I want to see, and we all want to see, and everybody I've interviewed and engaged with during this process, is we want to see change. And we think this potentially could be transformative change. So we just want to keep that positive momentum going and make sure that once government do buy into it as well and embrace the recommendations, that the people that are in the ecosystem just now and all the people that we engaged with during the review carry on being engaged, because they are key players in making change happen. So I'm quite excited about that, because there's so many people in there. And, that will drive structural change, system change, and cultural change. So that's what I probably want out of the report. In terms of my personal experience as an entrepreneur, well, I met so many more entrepreneurs that were so talented and, great stories. But I suppose two things. One, believe in yourself. Just have the confidence, bet on yourself. You are a good, you're going to, if you believe you can do something, then just go for it. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. And mistakes is part of the journey. And then the other one that you've all already mentioned, which is about surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded, that have that positive outlook to make a difference, to succeed. And you will find them if you go looking, but they won't come to you. You need to go out there and look for them.
Great. Well, let's continue the conversation. I'm afraid that's all we have time for now. Can I just say a very brief thanks to our amazing supporters, Startup Grind Scotland, Product Forge, Trustpilot, and of course the Freer Consultancy for helping us put together this event. Hopefully it'll be the first of many. We'll keep this conversation going. Thanks too to our fabulous panel, Professor Eleanor Shaw, Caroline Jameson, Sarah Ronald, and Anna Stewart. Do look out for more Pathways events. We'll be exploring even more about the report over future weeks and months. We hope to see you again soon for more conversations like this and for further insights into women in entrepreneurship. But from me, Vanessa Collingridge, bye-bye for now. Thank you.